The unwritten chapter. When love refused to end as a story. Seoul should have been asleep, but dawn was burning faster than night could hide. After the confession, silence was no longer an option. The world no longer waited, it demanded. Every news outlet screamed for answers, every sponsor tightened its grip, every fan whispered prayers in the dark. But in the middle of that chaos, two men stood still. Jungkook, his eyes no longer afraid, and Taehyung, his smile no longer a ghost. For the first time they had spoken not as idols, not as products, but as human beings. And once truth is spoken, it cannot be erased. Yet HYBE tried. Yet the industry tried. Contracts were pulled out like chains. Lawyers sharpened words like knives. Headlines twisted their confession into scandal, into betrayal, into everything except what it was, love. But the world was not blind anymore. The world had already chosen a side. Because in Times Square, a screen lit up once again. Not words this time. Not a leaked demo. But footage. Two figures walking in the rain, hoods pulled low, their hands almost touching but not quite. The camera zoomed in, not enough to be clear, but enough to break millions of hearts at once. Jungkook looked at Taehyung. Taehyung looked back. And for a second the world forgot how to breathe. No sound. No dialogue. Just a gaze that spoke louder than 1,000 songs. The clip was less than 10 seconds. But it spread like fire across every timeline. Hashtag stay with them. Hashtag not a scandal. Hashtag this is love. The hashtags drown the noise of tabloids, silenced the cold calculations of investors. Because fans were no longer defending an idol, they were defending two souls. And then the impossible happened. At midnight in Seoul, a live stream appeared again. Not on Weverse. Not on HYBE's platforms. But on a nameless channel with no logo, no monetization, no brand. A room. A single microphone. A piano. Jungkook sat before it, fingers trembling on the keys. Taehyung stood beside him, one hand resting lightly on the piano's edge. No introduction. No speech. Only music. Jungkook's voice cracked first. They told us to hide behind shadows. But shadows can bleed too. Then Taehyung's voice followed, deeper, steadier. They told us silence was safety. But silence almost killed us. And then both voices collided, not in harmony but in defiance. This is not a scandal. This is not a game. This is our life. This is our love. The live stream lasted only 4 minutes. No replay. No archive. Gone as quickly as it came. But in those 4 minutes the internet collapsed. YouTube crashed. Twitter burned. News anchors whispered as if afraid of their own voices. Because history had just been rewritten in real time. Army wept. Not just from love, but from liberation. The lines between fan and witness dissolved. They were no longer cheering for idols. They were standing as allies in a revolution. The next morning, headlines fought to contain it. BTS members defy industry with secret broadcast. The song that cannot be erased. From scandal to salvation, a love story the world refuses to kill. But for those who heard it live, there was no debate. It wasn't just a song. It wasn't just a confession. It was survival. And in a quiet corner of Seoul, away from flashing cameras and endless judgment, Jungkook closed his piano. Taehyung leaned against the wall, watching him. "Do you regret it?" Jungkook asked, his voice low. Taehyung shook his head, eyes soft, a whisper leaving his lips. "Love doesn't need permission. And neither do we." That night, the city slept uneasy. The industry panicked. The world held its breath. But ARMY knew. The story was no longer in anyone's hands, not HYBE's, not the media's, not even the government's. Because love, once set free, does not return to its cage. Dodger was the spark. Stay awake was the promise. The fire was defiance. The confession was truth. And tonight, the unwritten chapter began. Not with silence. Not with fear. But with music that refused to end. And everyone knew this was not just history. This was the future being born. The reckoning. When love became stronger than fear. Seoul woke restless. After the unwritten chapter, the city no longer belonged to silence. Screens glowed with fragments of a song that should never have existed, lines that tore through contracts, tore through the cage that idols were forced to live in. The industry panicked louder than ever. HYBE's boardrooms turned into battlefields. Legal teams prepared lawsuits. CEOs whispered words like termination, damage, collapse. But outside those glass towers, the streets spoke differently. Hongdae's walls were covered in graffiti overnight. Not curses. Not scandal. But words written in trembling hands. This is not shame. This is love. Stay awake. Stay alive. And as the sun rose, ARMY turned the city into a living mural. Every street corner, every subway wall, every bus stop carried messages no company could erase. The reckoning had begun. In a hotel room, Jungkook scrolled through the chaos on his phone. Headlines painted him as reckless, selfish, even dangerous. But then he found a photo, grainy, taken in the dark, showing a subway wall with 4 words. "We chose your truth." His hands trembled. Beside him, Taehyung leaned silently against the window, his reflection split by the glass. "They're louder than us now," he whispered. Jungkook turned, his voice almost breaking. "Are you afraid?" Taehyung shook his head. "I was once. But not anymore. Fear only wins if we stay silent." That night, a new storm broke. A leaked audio file, short, raw, filled with static. Yet within it, a voice undeniable, Taehyung. "They wanted us to be perfect. But perfection is just another word for prison." Seconds later, Jungkook's voice joined. "If loving him is rebellion, then I was born to rebel." The internet froze. Reporters scrambled. HYBE denied. But ARMY believed. Not because of the words, but because of the fire that burned inside them. They had seen too much, heard too much. The world could no longer be convinced it was fiction. And then New York lit up. Times Square screens went black, before a single sentence appeared, burning white against the dark. "Fear ends here." Crowds gasped. Phones lifted. And then, without warning, speakers hidden in the streets began to play, soft piano notes, familiar yet haunting. "Stay awake." But this time, not the demo. Not the leak. A new version. Full. Polished. Alive. Jungkook's voice soared first, tender but fierce. Taehyung followed, grounding it, deep as the ocean. And together, they carried a truth no scandal could kill. The song ended with silence, not emptiness but defiance. A silence that said, "We don't need permission to exist." Across the world, ARMY wept. Times Square became a shrine. Seoul streets filled with chants. Tokyo's billboards refused to turn off. London, Paris, Sao Paulo, each city became a stage without walls. And inside a quiet room, Jungkook looked at Taehyung with a half-smile. "We just started a war." Taehyung nodded, his voice steady. "Then let's win it, not with fear but with love." And the world knew, Dodger was the spark. Stay awake was the flame. The fire was defiance. The confession was truth. The unwritten chapter was survival. But the reckoning, this was the point of no return. Not just a story. Not just a scandal. But a movement. Because when love refuses to kneel, even an empire must tremble. The revolution. When love refused to kneel. The world no longer whispered. It roared. After the reckoning, silence was impossible. Times Square, the graffiti in Seoul, the leaked audio, rumors became proof. Proof that love could be louder than fear. But proof meant war. HYBE fought harder. Contracts hit courts. Headlines struck like knives, scandal that could end BTS. And yet, on the streets, another truth bloomed. ARMY turned protests into concerts. Seoul sang "Stay Awake." Paris lit candles. New York painted murals. Tokyo covered walls with stickers. Buenos Aires danced. It was no longer about 2 men. It was about everyone who refused silence. In a dim room, Jungkook lay restless. His phone buzzed with threats, demands, noise. None of it mattered. Beside him, Taehyung hummed softly. "Do you hear it?" Taehyung asked. "Hear what?" "The world," Taehyung smiled. "They're not waiting anymore. They're singing with us." And then the unthinkable. A small, raw stage in Seoul. No sponsors. No cameras. Just fans. Jungkook and Taehyung stepped onto it. Jungkook's voice cracked but held. They said music wasn't ours. But music belongs to hearts. Tonight it's yours. Taehyung followed, thunder in his tone. "If this ends everything, let it. At least it ends with truth." And then a song. Not "Stay Awake." Not "The Fire." A new song born that night. They built walls around our voices. But walls can crumble. They chained our hands. But hands still reach. They tried to bury us. But we were seeds all along. The crowd wept. Phones shook. The video spread across Tokyo, Paris, the world, faster than fire. By morning, the revolution had a name, the liberation. HYBE panicked. Governments debated. Stocks wavered. But none of it mattered. Because across cities, across languages, 3 phrases burned everywhere. Love is not a crime. Fear ends here. Stay awake. Stay alive. Stay free. At dawn, Jungkook whispered to Taehyung. We didn't just start a revolution. We became it. Taehyung smiled. And revolutions don't end. They live. Dodger was the spark. Stay awake the flame. The fire defiance. The confession truth. The reckoning the point of no return. But the revolution, that was freedom, breaking its chains. And the world knew, this wasn't just music. It was love, reborn as history.